Christopher Emmanuel Paul, 12-time All-Star, 10-time All-NBA member, and a 9-time All-Defensive member, has done it again. Tonight, the night I am making this, marks the 5th time Chris Paul blows a 2-0 series lead over his opponent, and one of the many times he goes out prematurely in the playoffs. Despite all the times he has helped the team do better than they already were and leveling them up, it has always ended in the same place: underachievement. In all of his 17 seasons, he has only gone to 2 conference finals and only 1 finals appearance where he lost to a 2-0 lead also to the Milwaukee Bucks. No matter how many times he fails, he always gets right back up to test father time and time again. And once again, it is made official by Mark Spears, who asked CP3 this is the last time we see him. And according to him, this will not be the last time, as he plans to lace them up for an 18th season to see if he can make it to the place it took him 16 seasons to achieve and possibly never win: an NBA Finals trophy. But with that, here today on the Alvini Linguine channel, where we talk about things all interesting basketball with your boy Alvini Linguine, we will be discussing the stat that I showed and all the implications that went into about how this player, CP3, is the only player to blow 5 2-0 leads in the playoffs. So if that makes enough sense, then let's get into the video, shall we? But before we do all that, you already know what I have to do. The like goal of this video is the usual 1,000 likes to help support the channel. So follow me on Twitter and Instagram for channel news and updates, and follow me on my Twitch for weekly streams. But with all that out of the way, you already know who it is. Roll it!
He incurred an injury dealing with weights in the weight room, so he stitched up in the left hand doing all this.
It's over, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, in our first stop down memory lane, we have the 2008 season where the New Orleans Hornets lost their playoff series in the second round to the San Antonio Spurs. Now, this season for CP3 and the Hornets symbolizes a lot. It was CP3's first ever All-Star selection, where he averaged 21 points a game with 11 assists and 2.7 steals a game, which both led the NBA. But this also represents the first time CP3 has ever made the playoffs. With that dominant season, he had showed himself to be one of the better two-way players in the NBA. He led his team to the 2nd seed, only behind the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Kobe Bryant, by 1 game. However, again, with that record and success comes a lot of expectations for a 22-year-old Chris Paul. His first time in the playoffs were pretty okay at first, and in his first round series, he faced off against in his prime Dirk Nowitzki and the Dallas Mavericks, but he was able to handle that team in 5 games, which in 3 of those games they won by 10 or more points. And CP3 again set the standard for himself greatly, upping his averages to 24 points a game and on even better efficiency than he did in the regular season, with 12 assists a game to put along with that. With a debut in the playoffs like that, it was safe to say that CP3 would be the future of the NBA, and it is indisputably the best point guard in the league the way he's showing himself right now in that playoff series. But then comes his second round matchup: the San Antonio Spurs. Now, as we all know, or I guess some of us know, the San Antonio Spurs the last year was the same team who won another championship, demolishing LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and are hungry for another trophy. And for the people who know, CP3 will use this series to take down the Spurs later in the future, once again after another championship year from them.
Green on Paul, and he got it! 1 second left. Clippers by 2.
But for now, this is his first experience with them. In games 1 and 2, the Hornets were able to shut down the Spurs to scores of 82 and 84 points respectively, while also taking commanding victories to set the tone at home. In those 2 games, CP3 put up averages of 23 points, 12 assists, and on only 1.5 turnovers, and again, on great efficiency. But one thing we always got to remember is that the teams they are facing is the San Antonio Spurs, who is led by one of the best power forwards of all time in Tim Duncan, and one of the best coaching minds of all time in Greg Popovich, or as I like to call him, Greg Popovich. But the Spurs, when they went back home for games 3 and 4, obviously changed their game plan for the Hornets, and that game plan was to stop the nucleus of the team from having a primary effect on the team. That nucleus being CP3. From games 3 to 7, CP3 dropped every game when it came to points per game. 35, then 23, then 22, then 21, and then in game 7, CP3 put up 18 points and fouled out. And on the subject of fouling out, this is also starting another big trend for CP3, the haunting of a man named Scott Foster, who until this day, he has never ever won a playoff game with him officiating. And as you can see by the foul calls on CP3, it'll set the tone for CP3 times in the playoffs. Now, a lot of people, this represented a bright future for CP3 and the Hornets. They took the last year's champions to 7 games despite blowing a 2-0 lead. Chris Paul and the others on the team will only get better, and the sky will absolutely be the limit for the young Chris Paul. However, for Chris Paul, this will only be the beginning of his streak of blowing leads and playoff disappointments. Now we go more than 5 years into the future. CP3 isn't able to get out of the second round with a few more seasons with the Hornets and even missed the playoffs 1 year there. And then due to that, in an infamous trade that tears up the NBA, CP3 and Kobe Bryant are now a dynamic duo, until the trade is vetoed by David Stern. So instead, he gets sent to the Lakers' unsuccessful little brother, the Clippers, to form a dynamic duo with Rookie of the Year winner Blake Griffin. In their second season together, they was able to achieve a 4th seed ranking in a very tough Western Conference, with their opponents being the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, the Memphis Grizzlies in this era were known for one thing: grit and grind, being led by people like Zach Randolph, DPOY winner of that year Marc Gasol, an emerging Mike Conley, and first team all-defensive member Tony Allen. And due to that, you're going into a very physical series with all these cast of characters being together on one team. And that's exactly what that whole entire series was. There are many moments you can find on YouTube with the Clippers and Grizzlies getting into fights and altercations, mainly between Blake Griffin and Zach Randolph, which you can also find a video on that one in particular. But again, it's still a very chippy series. And even the year before, you had the Clippers beating the Grizzlies in a very rough 7-game series that almost ended in Chris Paul blowing a 3-1 lead, which is something he will proceed to do later. But again, we're not talking about that in this video. So it's safe to say that this team has had some history with the Grizzlies. But going into it, both teams had a very even team base when it came to the players. But the Clippers took home court advantage and won the first 2 games. The first game, they won by 21, and in the second game, they won by 2. And once again, CP3 impressed in both of those games, especially when it came to scoring on that defense that limits teams to a league best 89 points per game that year. Remember, the league was a very different place a year ago. But anyways, from games 3 through 6, you heard me, they didn't even make it to 7 games. CP3 and the Clippers slowed down totally. First losing by 12 to Memphis in game 3, where CP3 had a series low 8 points and having more turnovers than assists, and got 19 the next game and was only getting 6 assists. As you can see again, the Memphis Grizzlies defense was totally taking a toll on the Clippers. Now, Chris Paul was able to turn up in game 5 and 6, getting a 35-point game and a 28-point game respectively. But when Blake Griffin gets injured in game 5 and you have no one else that can score for you, and then in game 6 he's still out and the Grizzlies have 7 players scoring 10 or more, you have Chris Paul's second ever blown 2-0 lead. Now, to evaluate the series, once again, you had 2 very equally matched teams facing off against each other in the series that could have gone either way to most critics. But it looked like it was going more towards the Clippers' way due to that 2-0 lead, but the Clippers and CP3 could not pull it off. Is it entirely CP3's fault? Wouldn't say that considering the injury to Blake, but it is a stay nonetheless to Chris Paul's legacy. Now we time skip once again. After a blown 3-1 lead to the Houston Rockets in the playoffs, which I will not be discussing in this video. If you want to hear me talk about that, check out the video I made that is on the screen now or in the description below. But anyways, we are now in CP3's 4th go-around in the playoffs with the Clippers. However, this time around, now we have some issues. In the season in particular, Blake Griffin had a major injury that kept him out for over half of the season, setting the team back a little bit from where they were last year. And with that, they are facing the Portland Trailblazers, a Portland Trailblazers team who has been on the decline for the last couple of seasons win-wise in the regular season. Skeptics saw this season as an easy win for the Clippers due to a less than stellar front court of Maurice Harkless, Al-Farouq Aminu, and Mason Plumlee starting for the Trailblazers, having to defend lob threats in Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. And the Clippers showed that to be true as they started off with a very dominant 2-0 series lead with 2 straight 20-point game blowouts. And what was better was the fact that star player of the Trailblazers, Damian Lillard, was doing terribly with shooting splits of 33% from the field and 21% from 3 in the first 2 games of the series, and not much better for the remaining of the series. However, once again, shit falls apart. First, in Game 3, the Trailblazers gets a combined 59 points from the duo of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, while the Clippers as a team shot 40% from the field, only went 3 of 18 from 3, and barely hit half of their free throws, where DeAndre Jordan shot 3 out of 10 of those. Overall, bad game from anyone not named Chris Paul, as he did what was expected of him. Then in Game 4, the worst possible thing that could happen happened. CP3 and Blake Griffin are both injured in the same game. Now, I joke around about the basketball gods being cruel, but what happened to both of them was just straight up unfortunate accidents. First, a bump of knees to Blake Griffin off a screen, a fucking screen, that tears his quadricep, and then CP3 mysteriously breaks his right hand. From there, the Clippers lost the next 2 games due to both of their stars being out, and again, another 2-0 series blown lead. Again, it was unfortunate, very much so, but not every day do you see your 2 leaders of a team both get injured in the same game indefinitely. But again, it'll be used in the sad history of 2-0 leads blown by Chris Paul, and the very, very sad history of CP3 in the playoffs. And now we are in modern times. Since last time, CP3 has had a pretty up and down journey, despite all of them ending in L's. Losing to the Jazz and Joe Johnson game winners, getting injured against the Warriors in his first ever conference finals, and losing to the Rockets the year after to a game-winning James Harden block on Lou Dort. But now we are in a new chapter, and possibly his last stop, the Phoenix Suns. Now, it's only been 2 seasons with the Suns, and he has made a great impact on that team, turning the 34-39 Suns into a 51-21 team, and then the next year turning them into a 64-18 team, which was by far the best team in the NBA. However, before we talk about that season, we have to talk about the one before. Now, I will reiterate that I myself never saw the Suns making it to where they were last season. I made a video on it last year, and people didn't appreciate me saying that the only reason they made it that far was due to the injuries of star players in every series that they had against other people. But that was proven right when they went to the finals and faced against the Eastern Conference champs, the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, once again, as the pattern goes, CP3 gains a 2-0 lead on the Bucks at home, where CP3 averaged 32 points per game in that 2-game span, destroying the Bucks in the pick and roll game with middies from every direction, and won those games in very convincing fashion. However, all it took was a simple lineup change and minute change to limit CP3, and all the Bucks had to do was take out Brook Lopez out of the rotation when things got bad for Bobby Portis to stop the abuse of Brook Lopez in the pick and roll game. And it caused CP3's point per game to drop down from 32 in the first 2 games to 19 throughout the next 4 games, and even with a 10-point game in Game 4, where he went 5 of 13. And there are plenty of things you could talk about within that series. His lack of coming through at big moments, his multiple chokes at the end of games in Games 3 through 6, and very key turnovers. And it all equaled up to another blown 2-0 series lead. In this case, there are 0 reasons you can give Chris Paul a break. He played all throughout the series with minimal injury concerns. His teammates, for the most part, played up to par, and he was even being coached by a world-class coach in Monty Williams. But this is again a simple case of Chris Paul doing a choke job in every single fashion. Coming in with a 2-0 series lead with home court advantage, then proceeding to lose the next 4 games in a reverse sweep adds another unfortunate playoff moment for Chris Paul. And unfortunately, the Scott Foster curse always stays true, as he hasn't won a game that he has officiated in the playoffs. And one game he did referee in that series was Game 7. At this point, CP3 is 36 years old and is playing with father time once again. And people are now, on top of that, are doubting the Suns. So with all that being said, how do the Phoenix Suns retaliate? And now the finale, or for his sake, hopefully, the finale. the NBA second round series between the Dallas Mavericks and the Phoenix Suns. Now, with this being the current season, let me provide some context on this season for the Suns. The Suns had the best record in the NBA of 64-18, which was 8 games better than the next highest total. The Suns also had their best season ever with that same record. Devin Booker owned his best scoring total in his career with 26.8 points per game. CP3 led the league with assists with over 10 a game. Mikal Bridges was a finalist for DPOY, and the Suns were both top 5 in defensive and offensive rating. But the Suns somehow found a way to lose to Luka Doncic, leading the series 2-0. Luka was truly right when he said that
everybody acting tough, but they up. Everybody acting tough.
Because he showed the potential overconfidence of the Suns and showed them that he has been in these type of situations before to come back 2-0 for the win. We all know how it happened. Let's talk about it anyways. The Suns once again received the same criticism from me when it came to their team. They have not played a single team that was fully healthy and even allowed the Pelicans to take them to 6 games without Zion Williamson. And CP3 was even showing his old ways again, having a 4-point game on 8 attempts in game 4. But he won the series, so all of that will be just put under the rug. But what won't be put under the rug is the next series against the Dallas Mavericks, a basically fully healthy team without Tim Hardaway Jr. But obviously no one would be calling them frauds for beating them without Tim Hardaway Jr. If you are, you're basically a psychopath. Anyways, let's do the same as usual. In the first 2 games, CP3 averaged 23 points on basically stellar shooting splits, shooting 7-13 in the first game and 11-16 in the second game, keeping up that momentum from that 14-14 closeout game he had in game 6 of the first round. But once again, things slowed down from games 3 to 7. To put it into perspective, from games 3 to 7, he put up averages of 9 points a game with 4.5 turnovers per game. In game 4, he put up 5 points and only shot the ball 4 times as one of the main leaders of the team. In game 7, where the fate of the season is in his hands and Scott Foster wasn't even officiating. The man was out with COVID, I believe. He went and scored a mighty 10 points. In a closeout game 7, CP3 scored 10 points. Now, I want to start this last part, not with any slander, but to make a point. We all have seen all these points made about the unfortunate circumstances for CP3 year after year after year after year as he loses year after year after year after year. Injury here, bad officiating there, a second option injured there, but in the last 2 seasons, what's the excuse been? Currently on Twitter, there is talks that CP3 was playing on a busted quadricep. But then I asked for the people who want to potentially use that as an excuse, why did he not sit out? As you saw from the last 5 games, he didn't provide much for his team offensively outside of playmaking after game 2. You can even argue that due to the injury that he might have had, I don't know, and at this point I don't care, he would have been a negative to the Suns. This could simply be a case of Father Time finally reaching his hands out at Chris Paul and telling him it's time. But like CP3 said last year, he's addicted to going to the finals. Well, it's great to see that he beat that addiction by losing in the second round. No questionable officiating from Scott Foster to bail you out, no injuries from any key teammates to bail you out, no controversies to bail you out. This is the case of CP3 committing one of the most egregious choke jobs anyone has ever seen in modern NBA history. To have that much of the NBA choosing the Suns to repeat and go out with a 33-point loss in a closeout Game 7 situation speaks volumes about this season for the Suns. Their fraudness as a team I have spoke about last year, and finally the potential cherry on top, again potentially, of CP3's legacy. Unless he has an embarrassment kink and gets off to it, then in that case at least he's getting his nut off. But with that over and done with, that concludes his 5th 2-0 lead blown series in his career. Now again, let's review his extended history of blown leads. First to the defending champion Spurs, then to the grit and grind Grizzlies, a 3-1 lead with the Clippers against the Houston Rockets, losing to the Trailblazers due to injuries, and finally 2 2-0 blown leads to the only healthy opponents they played in these last 2 playoffs they've been in. CP3 maybe is one of the best point guards to some or many, but the amount of stains on his career really goes against him when it's all said and done. He may have all these accolades, all the longevity in the world, but when he doesn't have is a ring, and he has had many on top of many opportunities to get one. In his prime with the Clippers, with James Harden in Houston, and now what will be his last chance most likely, because who knows, the nigga might play until he's 40. Now, what I want to know is y'all's view on CP3's career when it comes to what has happened to him year after year in the playoffs. I know everyone has different opinions on it, so start a dialogue in the comment section and let's get some thoughts thrown around. And remember, I read every single comment. But as always, I hope you enjoyed today's video and learned something new, as my vision for this channel is to inform and entertain. Check out my social medias for the inside life of Alvini and other channel news. Check out my Twitch where I stream weekly and have to go through shit like this all the time. Yeah, we're getting through this game kind of fast considering how I was getting through. And lastly, if you want to talk to your boy, there is always my Discord. Links are in the description. But with all that out of the way, this is your boy, Alvini Linguine, saying peace. And I want to be the first of many Clippers fans to say it. We made sure Luka didn't get outside the first round, so he's y'all problem now.